Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the federal election ramps up, housing affordability changes in the Northwest, and the world reacts to the loss of the Pope.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. I'm Jaylene Matthews. We begin tonight with our news local to the Northwest. As wildfire season becomes imminent, preparations and training have been underway locally to help keep our communities safe. Captain Brent Daw of the Thornhill Fire Department says the department has been working with BC Wildfire and the Terrace Fire Department to train and prepare.
So Thornhill Fire Department, we're definitely prepared for every situation. So working in conjunction with Terrace Fire all the time, working in conjunction with BC Wildfire here in Terrace, we're prepared and ready to go at any time.
He says one of the key defenses available in our area is static water sources.
So some information that a lot of community members don't understand is there is a lot of static water that we have stationed all around our regional district and in our response area. So if a hydrant ends up not having the capabilities to keep up with the work that we're doing, we can pull from multiple water sources, whether that's a lake, a creek, even the static sources that we have buried underground that are 10,000 gallons each. So there's multiple stations for us to do that.
Captain Doss says conditions are looking dry this season.
You know, we're just going off of our basic knowledge that we've seen, that the drier conditions are starting earlier on in the season. And just from what we have seen is the fine fuels that are on that forest floor, they're just more receptive to that spark. So as soon as that first ignition is happening, the fires are just moving that much more quickly. So when you are going out there and camping is going to be starting in the backyard, you know, little pit fires and that sort of stuff, is just to be cautious of that. Be fire aware at all times, and that the dry conditions are here.
Daw says the department is always looking for suitable recruits.
Recruiting went actually fairly well. We did get 4 through the door. That being said, we're still recruiting nonstop. So I think we will be opening up another one here come very shortly. More members we can have, the better it is at the end of the day. So we're holding strong now, but could always use some more.
The BC Northern Real Estate Board recently released their report on how housing affordability indicators in the North were looking during 2024. The report's primary conclusion stated that compared to the Vancouver and Victoria regions, homeownership in the North is more affordable, as its aggregate housing affordability indicator sat at 34.6%, although that number is slightly down from 2023. As for where the most affordable place to live in northern BC is, that continues to be Kitimat, alongside Fort St. John, which has been the case for the past 5 years, while the least affordable northern community is currently 100 Mile House. 100 Mile House was also the only community to see its affordability worsen last year, while every other northern community measured by the board improved its affordability. Vancouver police have rearrested a high-risk sex offender who went missing from his halfway house on Friday. They say the 30-year-old offender had been granted statutory release just the day before he went missing. Police say he was convicted of multiple sexual assaults against strangers in 2022. The news release says a Canada-wide warrant was issued for the man, who police say traveled to the downtown east side, where he violated the conditions of his release and took deliberate steps to avoid being found. Coming up next, record-breaking advance voting turnout. Welcome back. The last day of advance voting in the general election saw federal leaders scattered across the country pitching plans on home building and health care. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh campaigned in BC today, where he said his party would hold the line on health care and fight against cuts to social programs. Speaking in Vancouver, Singh said plans by Liberal leader Mark Carney to rein in government spending could result in $28 million worth of programming cuts. Meantime, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is forecasting $100 billion in deficits over the next 4 years as his party released its election platform with less than a week to go before the vote. As these party leaders gear up for the final push, each is trying to make the most of the last days of the campaign. CTV's Colton Prale has more.
In the final week of the campaign, the sprint to the finish started with Easter Sunday brunch.
Merci beaucoup de nous recevoir.
The bloc focused on gaining ground in Quebec, while the Conservatives and NDP were all in on the West Coast.
We cannot allow government overspending.
Pierre Poilievre promising to cut government spending, including on consultants, by $10 billion.
I will axe the inflation tax. We will do this by cutting waste, capping spending, reducing deficits, taxes, and inflation.
But the Conservatives are the only party that hasn't released a costed platform showing exactly how they'll hold up those promises and how much they'll cost. The party says it's coming, but not today.
Having them so late in the process, I think actually does a disservice to voters. And it's not just about how they vote on the 28th. It's what are they buying into on the 29th?
Pollsters say these BC stops are ones to watch. Nanos polling gives the Conservatives a slight lead over the Liberals in British Columbia, with the NDP a distant third.
If you're worried about Conservatives and you're worried about them getting in, vote for a New Democrat to beat Conservatives. Here on the island, that's who beats Conservatives.
Nationally, post-debate results show a jump in NDP support, while the gap at the top is down to 6 points.
Maybe Pierre Poilievre thinks that he can get a little bit of a breakthrough because if those vote splits in British Columbia favor the Conservatives, they could pick up seats.
Meanwhile, Mark Carney touting his newly released platform at a rally in the Nepean riding where he's running.
You need the government to step up and lead when the private sector is retreating under anxiety and uncertainty.
The Liberal leader promising $130 billion in new spending and a balanced operating budget in 3 years.
One area to watch in the final week, the senior vote. Nanos research has the Liberals and Conservatives essentially tied among voters under 54, but it's older Canadians keeping the Liberals atop the polls.
And as voting day looms, a record number of Canadians have actually already cast their votes. Here's CTV's Ben Milger.
People making their way into this East Van polling station had a variety of reasons for getting out to cast a ballot early.
I've never missed a vote since I've become voting age.
I think that this is one of the most important elections we've had in this country in quite a long time.
For many, the ballot box question this election is very clearly defined. Who is best equipped to handle the bluster and threats coming from the President of the United States?
Definitely feels like the most tense and very important time to vote.
We've heard reports just inside. The people who are tabulating votes said they had a much higher number of first-time voters today. So I think that concern is translating to voter turnout.
It led to an advance voting record 2 million ballots cast on Good Friday.
The other wild issue is the turnout. We haven't had 3 out of 4 eligible voters cast a ballot since 1988. Oddly enough, another election where our relationship with the United States was on the ballot.
High voter turnout is often a sign of an electorate looking for change, but this is not a typical Canadian election, and it very much remains to be seen which party benefits from the early surge at the polls.
If the same voting patterns that we've seen before continue, then this could be a massive win for the Liberals. But if the Conservatives get their act together and the 18 to 34-year-olds vote en masse, we could be in for a close election.
Polls show a tight race between the Liberals and Conservatives here in BC, with several ridings still considered toss-ups.
Ben Milger, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to the weather, today's moon phase is a waning crescent at 33% illumination. The sun rose at 6:16 a.m. this morning and will set at 8:50 p.m. Tonight on the north coast, expect a few showers ending overnight, then partly cloudy with the temperature steady near 6 degrees. Over the next few days on the north coast, expect mainly cloudy conditions with daily highs sitting around 10 degrees. Overnight lows in the 4 to 5 degree range. Tonight in the Terrace-Kitimat area, expect showers with winds coming from the south at 20 kilometers an hour, gusting to 40 and becoming light late this evening, a low of +5 degrees. Over the next few days in the Terrace-Kitimat area, expect some sun and clouds and some warmer temperatures sitting between 14 and 16 degrees. Overnight lows sitting between 1 and 4 degrees. In the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, tonight is looking mainly cloudy, clearing near midnight and a low of 0 degrees. Over the next few days in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, expect sun and clouds, with temperatures looking nice and warm in the 13 to 18 degree range, overnight lows between 0 and 5 degrees. Checking your highways around the Northwest now. On Highway 16, there's bridge maintenance and repairs on Haida Gwaii. There's utility work and industrial traffic throughout Highway 16, as well as a geotechnical investigation in Smithers with the eastbound lane being closed. On Highway 37, there are frost heaves. Highway 37A, watch for falling rocks. On Telegraph Creek Road, there are muddy sections, and the rest area is closed at Burnt Trailer Tanzilla access. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, the world reacts in the wake of the death of the Pope. And as the world reacts following the Easter death of a beloved Pope, here in Canada, the Pope is being remembered as both loving and fair. Here's CTV's Adrian Gobriel with a look at the Pope's legacy in Canada.
An Easter Monday Mass for the morning. Parishioners line the pews of Catholic cathedrals across Canada to remember the people's Pope.
Probably the first time I ever had a few tears in my eyes when a Pope died.
Pope Francis's passing surprising even archbishops who, like many, witnessed him take part in the Vatican's Easter Sunday proceedings.
We knew that the Pope had made an appearance, so it sounded like he was on the mend.
The faithful now left to remember a Pope whose compassionate voice was heard around the world.
He wore his heart on his sleeve, and you could just tell that his heart bled for anybody that was suffering or in need.
In 2022, a delegation from Canada visited Pope Francis at the Vatican.
Just looking at the pictures that
Residential school survivor Linda Daniels was part of that delegation.
when I shook his hand and I looked into his eyes, when I said, feel my hurt, feel our pain, and he nodded.
Following that meeting, Pope Francis made the pilgrimage to Canada, where he issued an emotional apology for the role the Catholic Church played in the Indigenous residential school system.
To show his regret, to make amends for the evil of the Catholic Church's role in residential schools was incredibly impactful.
Though for some Indigenous leaders, it is a day of mixed emotions.
I'm still waiting, as many of us are, for the return of artifacts that are sitting in Rome.
And still, many Indigenous peoples also took the time to reflect and give thanks.
Thank you, Your Holiness, Pope Francis, for coming and meeting the survivors. Miigwech.
The Assembly of First Nations also releasing a brief statement, in part saying that Pope Francis opened up a new chapter of healing. He listened to us and he heard us.
Catholic parishioners in Vancouver are mourning the death of Pope Francis, as yesterday marked Easter Monday. Vancouver resident and Indigenous community member Jocelyn Robinson spoke outside Vancouver's Holy Rosary Cathedral after Easter Mass, saying Pope Francis was able to breathe new life into dialogue between First Nations and the Church. She says she thinks future conversations are infused with the Pope's efforts towards peace between First Nations and the Church. The Vatican confirmed the Pope had died at the age of 88 due to a stroke, which eventually led to heart failure. Here's CTV's Heather Butts with more from the Vatican.
The faithful joining tonight in prayer in St. Peter's Square.
These, the first sounds letting the world know of the death of Pope Francis, the end of a monumental era for the Catholic Church, a pontiff who charmed the world with his humble style and devotion to the less fortunate.
He was an example of loving everyone, no matter who you were.
The announcement from Vatican officials.
Il Vescovo di Roma Francesco è tornato alla casa del Padre.
The Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. The statement just hours after a surprise appearance in what would be his final Easter blessing yesterday, where he appealed for a ceasefire to end what he called a dramatic and deplorable humanitarian situation in Gaza, a worrisome climate of anti-Semitism, and urging the release of all remaining hostages. The time of his passing on Easter Monday not lost on the faithful.
Impressive that he made it to Easter. I think that's almost like a miracle for Italy, but it's sad.
From the moment he stepped forward as Pope, Francis made it known his would be a different papacy.
Buonasera.
The first Jesuit from Argentina, the first from the Americas, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the son of Italian immigrants. He modeled a life of simplicity. He refused to live in the grand papal apartment and wore silver, not gold. Elected at the age of 76, still he was progressive, allowing divorced Catholics to take part in the communion service.
Chi sono io per giudicarla?
The pontiff eased the hard stance the church previously held on same-sex couples, asking early on, "Who am I to judge?" Contraception, he maintained, shouldn't be used to prevent pregnancy, but was acceptable to prevent disease. He praised women and promoted a record number to leadership positions, but stopped short of allowing them to be priests. On abortion, he compared it to hiring a hitman.
Per risolvere un problema.
He was in part defined by humility. Francis comforted the vulnerable and championed the plight of the poor. He condemned world conflicts, urging peace in Ukraine, denouncing President Trump's deportation policies. He pushed for better treatment of migrants and warned of suffering because of climate change. Under his watch, the church confronted the clergy's sex abuse scandals. In a letter to all Catholics, he wrote, "We showed no care for the little ones. We abandoned them," ordering a first-ever Roman Catholic summit on pedophilia and introducing new reforms, though critics say he didn't go far enough to address the systemic failures. To generations of Indigenous Canadians, he apologized.
Nel chiedervi scusa.
For the abuses they suffered in Canada's Catholic-run residential schools, repeating it again during an historic week-long visit to Canada. Even in his final hours at Sunday's Easter Mass, he remained a beacon of hope, reminding the world to revive our trust in others, including those who are different than ourselves. Heather Butts, CTV News.
And when one era ends, another always begins. The next question on the agenda, who is going to be the next pope?
After Pope Francis is laid to rest, the process to replace him will begin.
After they have an opening mass, they meet in the Sistine Chapel. They have generally 2 votes in the morning, 2 votes in the afternoon, until they reach a 2/3 majority and know that at that point they've elected a pope.
It could take days before that white smoke filled the sky over Vatican City, signaling a new head of the Catholic Church has been selected. 252 cardinals will descend upon Vatican City to vote. They must be under 80 years old. In this conclave, there will be 135 eligible cardinals. 108 of them were appointed by Pope Francis.
He appointed the vast majority of this body of cardinal electors. That doesn't mean, however, that he has appointed people of a similar mindset.
Habemus Papam. When a 2/3 majority is reached, the voting process will conclude. While there's no way to know who will eventually lead the church, some of the cardinals being considered. 70-year-old Cardinal Pietro Parolin from Italy, the Vatican's Secretary of State since 2013. 67-year-old Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, who has led the Missionary Evangelization Office and could become the first Asian pope. and 72-year-old Archbishop of Budapest, Peter Erdo, who twice served as head of the Council of European Episcopal Conferences.
We're going to get another pope who is invested in the full panoply of Catholic teachings, but who might have particular emphases that he thinks are necessary because of the times we live in.
Turning to the stock markets now, Canada's main stock index rose almost 300 points, while U.S. stock markets also climbed. The Canadian dollar rose slightly. The price of gold fell $5.90. Oil rose $1.26. Natural gas fell by a cent. Aluminum had no changes. In Toronto, the TSX rose by 297 points. The Venture Index fell 1/10 of a point. In New York, the Nasdaq rose by almost 430 points, and the Dow Jones gained almost 1,017 points. Still ahead, a new method of fighting wildfires with drones. Welcome back. Alberta is reporting 29 new cases of measles in the province. The government says many of the new cases are in the southern and central parts of the province, which 7 are in the north and 1 is in Edmonton. There have now been 118 measles cases reported in Alberta since early last month. This comes as Quebec has declared an end to a measles outbreak in that province, where no new cases have been reported for 32 days. And as wildfire season approaches and preparations are underway, one BC company has come up with exciting new technology in the wildfire fighting business. Here's CTV's Isabella Zavaris with more.
Thick smoke paired with dwindling daylight. Fighting wildfires at night can be fraught. When crews are resting, the burn continues.
And these fires are able to creep along and essentially break down a lot of the work that was done during the day.
Suppressing the flames to give emergency responders a head start in the morning is why one BC company developed an autonomous drone. It automatically picks up water, dousing hotspots, even reaching remote areas.
They have a 2-hour endurance at 400 kilogram payload with an airspeed slightly slower than a traditional helicopter.
It's personal for Fireswarm Solutions CEO Alex Deslauriers. In 2023, during one of BC's worst wildfire seasons, a home that had been in his family for 4 generations in Gun Lake was destroyed.
At that point, as an aerospace engineer, I said, wait a minute, I know the people and the professionals that can really bring change to the problem that we have today.
We've always wanted to have this technology to help us get to fires more quickly and more safely.
Fireswarm partnered with another BC company that will help provide training to operate the drones.
I think that it'll take very little time for people to appreciate just how much safer they'll be, either at the edges of communities or around critical infrastructure, when equipment like this is pre-positioned and there are a lot of trained operators available to respond quickly.
That rapid response is part of why it was created. The city of Kelowna will be testing it this summer, with permanent plans for the drones to be deployed next year. It's an additional tool as BC and the rest of the country braces for another wildfire season. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News.
That's our news for now. For more local news, visit us at cftktv.com or find us on social media. We're on YouTube, X, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Thanks for watching and have a great evening.